Hello, and welcome back to the Unwatchables. This is a show where we talk movies, but not just any movies. Here we discuss what we call one-timers and no-timers. One-timers are movies that we recommend that you see at least once. They're maybe worth that view, but probably not again. And no-timers are movies that we recommend you never see, don't spend your time or money on. And today, our no-timer will be Holmes and Watson that we'll be starting out with. And next, our one-timer will be The Amazing Spider-Man, so stay tuned. I'm Kylie.
This is Marcus. Let's go over this Holmes and Watson movie that came out around Christmas time. It stars John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, and it was directed by Ethan Coen, not to be confused with the other Ethan Coen that people typically like of the Coen brothers. Kylie, what are your opinions about this Holmes and Watson movie that came out?
So, my initial impression before I even saw it, I thought, okay, it's gonna be a stupid movie. It's not gonna be very redeeming, but I thought that it would make me laugh at least. And honestly, this might just be my humor, but I sat through the entire thing and I almost laughed once, but that was it. I didn't laugh at all. So, overall, extremely disappointed.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's funny that you almost laughed a couple times. I think I chuckled a few times, but I feel like I went into the movie and I had heard that, when it first came out, it had like 0% on Rotten Tomatoes for a few days. And then I think eventually it got bumped up to like a 6 or 7%, something like that. So, yeah, I was going to it thinking, okay, this is like one of the worst movies ever. I mean, I guess it's better than worst movie ever title, but there's so many things in it that are just so, like, not well written or funny. And I don't know what it is, like, because, everybody loves John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell paired together. They think, they see, a movie like Talladega Nights or Step Brothers that came out. But I think maybe people might be confusing the fact that, like, those two films came out, like, 10 plus years ago. Like, I think Talladega Nights came out, like, mid-2000s, probably 2005, 2006. And, Step Brothers came out in 2008. And at that time, I mean, yeah, they were middle-aged guys, but now they're really middle-aged guys. And it just seems like Will Ferrell, for some of his movies, it just seems like as he gets older, and you can see he's looking older, right? Like, he's a little heavier from before, like, his hair's a little grayer, like, he just looks like an older-ish, he looks like a 50-year-old guy, and, like, I don't know if it's just funny to watch a 50-year-old guy be, like, incredibly stupid and moronic. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I just think that for this type of a movie, it didn't really make sense because there's countless other spoofs, and this, I feel like it was clearly a spoof of the Robert Downey Jr. films, the Sherlock Holmes movies,
Yeah.
with the, like,
With Jude Law?
Yeah.
Directed by Guy Ritchie and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and I just think that, Will Ferrell's always playing incredibly stupid characters, and for this, where Sherlock Holmes is a genius, it just didn't make sense to have a genius that didn't have any common sense. And so that was really weird to me, and it just, I think it made a lot of the jokes not play out well at all.
Well, on top of that fact, because you're totally right, that not only does he come off kind of like a buffoon in some regards, he's also just incredibly unlikable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a buffoon, but he's also, like, a gigantic a-hole. So, like, in the part of the film where he betrays Watson, you kind of, I mean, there's not really a lot to like about him there. Like, I feel like, I'm trying to think of a better way you could have portrayed him. You could have made him into a person that's a little bit more of a buffoon, but you needed to have some kind of heart there. There needed to be something there where you look at it and you say, okay, like, this guy, even though he might say things that are inappropriate or he might do things that are stupid, there's still, like, a heart of gold somewhere in there. Like, almost like a Michael Scott from The Office, where Michael Scott might say things that are, like, racist or inadvertently offend somebody, or he'll say some, just something kind of stupid, but, in his heart, you can tell that he's, like, a good person, kind of, like, underneath that whole exterior of just being stupid and whatnot and being vain.
He's just ignorant.
Yeah, he's ignorant. But, like, I mean, in his heart, like, I don't think he really dislikes people, but, like, yeah, I mean, this Holmes and Watson, especially the portrayal by Will Ferrell, I mean, yeah, it's just so weird. And the love aspect, the love interest aspect. I mean, for both of it was just really weird. Like, that girl, I mean, she kind of portrays herself to be a person that's, like, mentally challenged. So I mean, I don't know. It's just a really weird dynamic where it's like, wait a minute. So this is a guy we're supposed to like? He likes a person that's
A cat.
yeah, mentally challenged. He's a douchebag. He's kind of stupid. Like, it's not. I mean, there has to be an element to like there. Huh.
I know. Going off what you're saying, I took a look at basically all of his relationships with the other characters. You have the queen, which is someone that he's serving, who he thinks that he kills.
Yeah.
And instead of, getting the guards immediately, they pull a Weekend at Bernie's moment and yeah, and they talk through her to the guards, and they're about to cut her up when she wakes up, and suddenly she's not dead.
Yeah.
And then let's see, so he lets her down, definitely, is horrible to the queen of all people. And then you have his romantic interest, who is the cat woman, who just why would you root for that in any circumstance?
No.
And then and then Watson, who he just totally betrays. And so and wait, before I forget, the hired help, they treat her terribly. Holmes and Watson together, they just scream at her, and so he's just horrible to everyone around him.
I mean, there's a lot to really unpack. Yeah, you're totally right. Like there's something about, like, Aristotle had a quote where he said something like, friendship, there has to be something about, like, friendship having to do with, like, people being equals, where it's hard for a friendship to exist if, like, one guy owes, like, the other guy, like, a bunch of money, or if, like, one guy is, like, incredibly wealthy and super successful, the other guy is, like, living in his mom's basement. It's kind of like that aspect of people that are friends are usually kind of, like, ish on par with one another, and they have, like, general respect for one another, kind of in their status of life. And this film, like, his best friend Watson is, like, his follower. It's not like an equal relationship between two people that are friends typically, or partners. Like, and then in the movie, it's like, it's the joke. It's like, oh, Watson becomes the partner, but, like, I don't know.
Barely. I mean, in the end of the movie, you see his little plaque that says co-detective, then it pans up to Holmes's giant, plaque that says deputy detective? Something like that. Head detective.
It's like a higher honor, for sure.
Yeah, and it's way bigger. So in the end, he really didn't learn anything, He just made a mistake and he corrected it.
It was. What'd you think about Ralph Fiennes in it?
Who's that?
He was the bad guy. He was Moriarty. Moriarty, yeah.
Well, I was confused because most of the time it wasn't actually Moriarty. It was this other guy that was his
But that's the same actor. It was Ralph Fiennes played the
really?
Pretender too, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
From what it looked like to me.
Okay, because I just know at one point they ripped his beard off and whatever, so I thought that it was a different guy. That's my bad.
I think it was. Well, that was one of the only parts of the whole movie I laughed at the end. They're at that salon, or saloon, sorry, from, like, whatever, 1890 in the West. They had the cow. I kind of chuckled at that part because I was like, what is this? And, like, Ralph Fiennes is in the corner, but yeah, no, I mean, it was kind of a weird waste of that actor.
I know. I thought that he was actually the least ridiculous part of the movie because he had that sort of stern look throughout the film, and he didn't really break that ever to make a stupid joke or whatever. He
was an evil dude.
Yeah,
he could have been the evil dude in an actual real Sherlock Holmes movie.
Yeah, I felt that he was actually the best part of it.
He was
in my opinion. I know.
Did you ever see In Bruges?
No, I didn't.
Oh my gosh, he's really great in that. It's like I guess you could call it like a comedy drama, or like a dark comedy. But they should have brought his character from that, because this was just. That's like your standard affair. You have Ralph Fiennes make him the villain. It's like, oh, how's he going to be the villain? Give him a beard. And it's almost like the same thing they did with, oh my gosh, Christoph Waltz. Like for all those years, Christoph Waltz, it was like, Christoph Waltz is going to be the bad guy. Let's just put him in the movie. It's like, oh, it's, oh my gosh, the Green Hornet. It's the Green Hornet. Oh, what is he going to do? He's just going to be the bad guy. And, like, there's been several movies where it's like, Christoph Waltz, like, kind of this, like, smart foreign guy. It's like, oh, he could be a mastermind bad guy. And then with Ralph Fiennes, he kind of fits in that same mold of, like, this intense kind of British guy. Let's make him a little bit of the bad guy, right? Mm-hmm. And then give him anything to do. There was no fight scenes. He was a MacGuffin for a film that, like, treats you like an idiot. Like, really, like, that's the whole thing. When you look at the casting, you're like, oh, he's the bad guy. I think in some posters, he's the bad guy, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't do jack.
I know. There was a lot about the plot that I felt it just kind of fell through. And also, I just like the whole design of the movie was really bad. I understand that they had kind of a low budget. I mean, it was 40 million, but that's not horrible.
No.
And I mean, all the sets just really looked like sets. You could really tell whenever they were walking around, and it just really bummed me out, this movie. I guess one of the worst parts of this movie was probably the singing number. Didn't crack a single smile. It felt really out of context because nowhere in the trailer, nothing suggested that this was any type of a musical, so it was really out of place. I think it was supposed to be funny, but I didn't get it.
I mean, like, you combine that with the scene of when they're in the boxing ring, and that guy, I can't remember his name, but he was in Tropic Thunder, the British guy that, like, had, like, the hook.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember that comedian's name. I'm sure someone will remember his name, but the singing number and the fighting number, the fight scene was just, they just threw stuff at the wall. And the singing number, yeah, it was just, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like maybe somebody hasn't told Will Ferrell that, like, I don't know, that, like, he can't do everything, but, like, when he tries to do a lot of stuff, it just, like, it comes off really bad. Like, the singing stuff, like, when he's actually singing and kind of prancing, and, like, for him, it's kind of like, he's done a lot of films that I really like. But every time I feel like he ever does movies, it's always, he's at his best when he does a certain kind of character. When he's a character that's stupid. When he's a character that's stupid but not totally mean is when he's at his best. Like, for example, I think a film like, you know, your Night at the Roxbury, or your Anchorman, or even your Elf. Like, in Elf, in certain regards, he's kind of a moron, right? Like, he's just a person that's really, like, blind to the world. Or even look at a film like The Other Guys. And even in that, like, the film is just so... Did you see The Other Guys?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really like that movie, but in that film, in my opinion, he's actually kind of acting. Because in The Other Guys, he was what you would call kind of like the straight man, but he's, like, way over the top of it, right? Like, he's a huge Poindexter, and he's, like, really by the books, and it's really funny when you see him with, like, a wooden gun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're driving that Prius, and it's just really funny. But, like, yeah, in this, I mean, he was just given too much free reign. It's like, oh, let's just put in this huge singing number, and I'm gonna sing and I'm gonna dance because now I've realized the fact that, like, it wasn't, like, my best friend wasn't the bad guy, and I realized that, like, I'm so, you know, caught up in myself that I have to realize the fact that, like, I actually needed a friend. Like, it just kind of, it just felt so, like, hollow and just so, like, by the books, this is how the third act is going to begin. Like, the turning point for, like, the climax to happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Also, I mean, now that we're at the climax, I mean, what did you think of that? Because I thought that, you know, having it be the maid that ended up being the mastermind behind everything, I didn't think that really made sense. Her being the daughter of Moriarty and all that. Yeah. For whatever reason, I wasn't really surprised. I didn't expect it to be her, but I just didn't really get it. I thought it was kind of a dumb ending.
Yeah, it was kind of. And I feel like the last time I saw that actress, I know she's been in several things, but she was in a movie that was about the guy that wrote Winnie the Pooh. I'm trying to think of who it was. The guy that... He's a redhead guy in the new Star Wars films. His dad's like a big actor. Anyways, that guy and Margot Robbie were in a movie where it's about the guy that wrote Winnie the Pooh and, like, his personal life and all this stuff. And that girl, Moriarty's daughter, is in it. And in that film, she's, like, the nanny for their kid, and she's really nice, really respectable. And that film takes place in, you know, whatever, 1940 or whatever, like, definitely in the past in England.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, in my view, it's like, all right, I see that girl in that period piece from that movie, the Winnie the Pooh one. And the next one I see her is Holmes and Watson. She's a raging whore. Like, literally, a big prostitute that dies in, like, a comic or, like, a cartoon villain way. Like, somehow John C. Reilly throws the bomb from the Titanic, like, where it is, and the boat that she's in is so far away, like, distance-wise, like, continuity-wise, very far. It happens to land right in the boat, and it just explodes them. Like, I thought that was so, like, it's hard to believe that was actually serious. Like, they really thought, like, this is going to be a satisfying conclusion to see this girl they treated like crap get exploded.
I know. Honestly, I also feel like with most comedies, you know, they're funny throughout, but then if it's an action, then the the climax of the movie is somewhat serious, you know,
Yeah.
but they just kept it ridiculous throughout the entire thing. It was like, you know, let's just make one big goofy mess so that people are laughing the entire time. Nothing matters. Let's just do that. But the problem was no one was laughing.
No one.
No, and in my theater, I think people laughed maybe twice, and within the first 15 minutes, someone walked up and left, and then a half hour later, someone else walked out and left, and by that point, I think there were about 6 of us in the theater, but, you know, we all stuck it out.
Was it couples, most of these people, or was it just one guy off by himself?
Well, let's see. I think most people were by themselves, and there was actually, like, an elderly couple there. I saw this movie.
If I didn't know what they were getting into.
No, probably not. I'm guessing they thought that it was an actual, revamping of Holmes and Watson. Poor couple.
Jeez. You know, I feel like sometimes, like, when you see movies alone, like, I'll see movies often alone, and there's always, like, or oftentimes, I'll see, like, it's like somebody, just like a random guy by himself. It always seems like it's a guy. And, like, I just feel like he just doesn't care. Like, there's just some people that just watch, like, everything out, and I feel like those are the only people that watch Holmes and Watson. I mean, in a large regard, I just feel like with Will Ferrell, I just don't think his brand of humor is really that funny anymore. I think it's unfunny because we've seen it so many times. It's almost like Adam Sandler at this point, but like even almost in some sense, even more pathetic. Because at least with Adam Sandler, people can say whatever they want to, and they can say his movies all suck and this and that. But like at least with him, like he'll take an idea that's kind of like, oh, that's an interesting idea or whatever, maybe on paper, and then like he'll fill all of his guys with it, and all of his films have a feel. Like it's like, this is an Adam Sandler movie, right? This is, you know, Daddy's Boy, or, you know, Jack and Jill, or even some of his ones that aren't like awful, like a Spanglish, or the movie with Jennifer Aniston that he was in. I can't remember the name, but like, you know, at least they're kind of a vibe, and I feel like he doesn't try. Of course, neither one of them try anymore, but like, I feel like at least Adam Sandler tries a little bit more. I feel like Will Ferrell, it's just like, okay, I'm gonna play a role in which I'm like a really pathetic guy that's a jerk and an idiot. Like every film he's in, he's always like very weak, like physically weak, and like it's kind of funny a little bit sometimes. Like, okay, you know, like an elf when what's his name?
Buddy?
Yeah, no. Like when he's in the room and he says like, "Oh, you're a dwarf," or "You're an elf."
Oh,
He says that to Peter Dinklage. He's like, "You're an elf, right?" And Peter Dinklage throws him around. It's like, okay, that's kind of funny because Will Ferrell's kind of a taller guy, and it's kind of funny in that sense. But then like every movie where he's getting beat up by like children or elderly women or this and that, like it just looks like it's just not funny anymore when you see it for 20 years straight, when you're like, I get it, like this guy is like a really like a weak, slimy kind of guy. And like in Holmes and Watson just feels like it's somebody thought to themselves like, let's take Will Ferrell, we'll throw in John C. Reilly for good measure, and then like let's just make a Will Ferrell movie. And this can be fun. I mean, literally, the guy that directed this, he directed that one with Kevin Hart where they did the Get Hard. And like that movie was just acceptable. Like certainly no better than acceptable, right? And even in that, like he's the same character. It's kind of like he's smart in some certain regards, but he's also really stupid in other regards, and he's just like really like pathetic, I think. And I just don't care. I personally don't really like to, like, I don't care to watch that anymore.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between him and Adam Sandler especially is that with Adam Sandler, he's always fairly dry and sarcastic, but he's really, really witty. And so he's someone smart that you can generally end up rooting for, whereas Will Ferrell just is kind of, you know, he's just an idiot.
Yeah.
That's
every
all it really
movie.
is. Yeah.
I mean, even with Adam Sandler too, he has more to kind of like hang his laurels on. Like he has, like people will look back, especially if you're a certain age, you look back at like Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison and The Waterboy, and you look back and you say, okay, like he built up enough equity in those films where it floats him when he does, you know, Jack and Jill type of films, right? But like with Will Ferrell, I mean, think about this, really think in your mind, like what is by far your favorite Will Ferrell movie? So a lot of people might say, okay, Elf. It's like, all right, I'll give you Elf, but that's so unlike Will Ferrell though. Like, because if you really boil it down, Buddy the Elf is like actually like a really nice guy. He's a fish out of water story, right? And that film's not a comedy. Like, it's a Christmas like family movie, but it's not like a ha ha funny. Like I've watched it twice in the last month. Like it's not like a like they're not jokes set up to be Will Ferrell level jokes.
Right.
So like again, think to yourself like, okay, my favorite Will Ferrell movie. Like, I mean, what like even Talladega Nights is like really obnoxious at parts, and like Anchorman, like yeah, it's good, but I mean, some people preach it like it's gospel, and I don't think it's like that good. And then you start really boiling it down. I mean, I feel like he doesn't deserve a break for making like 10 crappy films in the last 10 years. I mean, even like that Casino movie, I can't remember. Oh, The House.
The House.
Did you see The House?
With Amy Poehler, yeah.
What was that like?
I actually thought that it was kind of funny. I really like Amy Poehler, so she made the movie for me. I didn't think it was a good movie, but I did laugh. I found it really funny.
Okay.
So, but I think it was all her, honestly. I don't think that Will Ferrell really contributed much to that. It could have been really anybody because she carried the movie.
Could have swapped him out.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, this Holmes and Watson though, it's really good for nothing. I mean, I don't think it was as bad as you thought it was, but it's certainly like and I think the idea too of making a parody film of like Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes. I mean, the first one came out 10 years ago. Yeah. Like the Guy Ritchie, Robert Downey Jr. one came out like either 08 or 09.
Yeah, I think
so we're talking like 10 years ago almost now. Like those films aren't even topical anymore. Like now I think when more people think like Sherlock Holmes, they probably think Benedict Cumberbatch's like the BC one or BBC
the show.
One. Yeah, so it's like I think this parody came out like too late and it's too unfunny and it's almost like they filmed it in 2010 and then they left it on a shelf for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then they thought, oh, how can we modernize it? Let's have that one girl, the love interest of John C. Reilly from America. Let's have her like arbitrarily talk about American politics. Like it's like one time it's maybe kind of funny. There's like 3 or 4 times. It gets to a point where it's like, oh my gosh, like what do you want? What do you want to accomplish here? Like
I know. I don't think that this movie really accomplished much. Okay, so now we will switch over to The Amazing Spider-Man, which had Andrew Garfield in it and Emma Stone. What did you think, Marcus?
Yeah, so I mean, this movie's a little older, but well, it's kind of crazy to think about. They had the number of years between now to Amazing Spider-Man 1 that came out in 2012 is almost the same amount of time that existed between Spider-Man 2, the last truly great Spider-Man, to Amazing Spider-Man. So I feel like with Amazing Spider-Man, I feel like every Spider-Man film since Spider-Man 2 by Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire has like ranged from kind of bad from Amazing Spider-Man 2 to just kind of like to oh, that was okay. It's kind of depressing because Spider-Man is such a great hero and the lore is really good and you know the character himself, the powers I think really make for entertaining cinema. Like they make for really good scenes and good action scenes and just everything about him. The fact that he's not rich and yeah, I mean there's a lot to like about the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And I feel like you actually really root for Peter Parker. And it's not just, oh, I want to see Spider-Man do something cool. But that being said, with Amazing Spider-Man, it just, I mean, I know that Sony had to they had contractually, they had to make a new Spider-Man movie in a certain amount of time. So that's why they created Amazing Spider-Man. But I mean, you kind of have to think about what year Amazing Spider-Man came out. So you put in the context of it comes out in the summer of 2012. Well, what else came out in the summer of 2012? You had Avengers 1 and you had The Dark Knight Rises came out, right? So it's kind of like Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man, got kind of caught in a cross-sectional time of superhero films. Like basically Avengers cemented Marvel as the way of the future going forward. And it is to this day, the Marvel way of superhero films are dominant, right? And then you see with Dark Knight Rises, that was the last hurrah for non-Marvel style superhero films that did very well for themselves. And then, yeah, for Amazing Spider-Man, it's like the redheaded stepchild where you just look at it and you say, okay, like, we've seen this plot before. There's, love interest of Peter Parker. Although, granted, in that film, it was Gwen Stacy and not Mary Jane Watson. But there's just not a lot to really talk about here. I mean, first off, Andrew Garfield was probably about 25 years old. He did the role of Peter Parker as a high schooler. Yeah, I mean, it honestly, what this film kind of reminds me of, it kind of reminds me of Plato's The Republic, where he talks about the cave, he talks about the reflections. Like, this film kind of reminded me of that, where we're not watching the true Spider-Man, because in my mind, the real Spider-Man is Tobey Maguire. And we're not watching a real director of a Spider-Man film, because that film, The Amazing Spider-Man, had Mark Webb, who directed 500 Days of Summer, which was a great movie. But in my opinion, Sam Raimi is the greatest Spider-Man director ever. So you're saying like a good director, but not the true Spider-Man director. And then, like Kristen Dunst, even though she was, kind of a floozy a little bit in the original Spider-Man's, kind of not very loyal to Peter Parker, but I feel like that felt kind of real. Like the way that he interacted with her, it seemed like there was some authenticity to it, and it seemed like there actually was chemistry between the two of them. So in this film too, it's like you have a love interest in Emma Stone that she's kind of like a mirror lesser image of Kristen Dunst as Mary Jane Watson. And yeah, you just watch this film and you just think you just go down the line, like the villains aren't as good as Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin or Doc Ock in Amazing Spider-Man 2. And you look at like, Martin Sheen, nowhere near as good as the original Uncle Ben. And they have a good expression too, in this film it was something like, if you have power, you have the responsibility to do what's right. There's some kind of line like that, right? And the first film, the line is just so memorable. It's with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so memorable. And the way Uncle Ben died in the first one, it's like, wow, like this is sad and it's real. And this film, just every regard, is just at least one step behind Spider-Man's 1 and 2. So, and then maybe someone will say, okay, well, you can't compare The Amazing Spider-Man 1 to either of the Spider-Mans 1 or 2 because that's too unfair, because those two films are like super great and they were iconic and probably the best two superhero films ever, or two of the best ever. So you could say, okay, well, it's not fair to compare it to that. But, all right, so even if you take that out of it, I mean, The Amazing Spider-Man just by itself is just very, generic. And the CG doesn't hold up the way that it probably should, especially with the lizard people. And the plot is just also just wild. I mean, the plot is basically Dr. Connors is going to turn the city of New York into lizard men.
Yeah, that makes absolutely no sense. But that's one of the biggest problems with this movie that I had is like, while it might look okay and whatnot, and the action might be good, the characters' motivations don't really make any sense whatsoever, especially the villain, because you have this guy and basically the entire motivation is his name Harry Osborn? No,
Dr. Connors?
No, not Dr. Well, he's working for, I can't remember his first name.
Norman?
He owns, yeah, Norman
Osborn.
Norman
father.
Osborn. He's dying, so he has this motivation to finish this project, but his true motivation is that he wants to regrow his arm. And so once he starts using the serum that regrows his arm and whatnot, it's not perfected. He starts going crazy for some reason, and he starts hearing voices just like in the original Spider-Man, and it seems like they kind of just copied a lot of what happened from the original Spider-Man movies, and then his motivations just become completely unclear. Starts to hate Peter Parker for virtually no reason, and then wants to turn everyone in New York into lizard people.
For the big skybeam, yeah.
For no real greater purpose.
It's a real big stretch to get to the lizard people.
Yeah.
Because at least, like, with the first two Spider-Man movies, even the third one, even though people hate on Spider-Man 3 directed by Sam Raimi, I mean, at least the villains of those films have motivations that make sense. Like, Willem Dafoe in the first film, he becomes the Green Goblin partially because he feels like he has to, but also, once he's Green Goblin, he's kind of killing his like rivals in the executive world, right? Or his rivals in the corporate world. So it's like, okay, it kind of makes sense that the serum makes him nuts and it's done in a good way. And then, in Amazing Spider-Man 2, Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, he doesn't intend to become a crazy person. Like, he's playing with this particle thing. He's kind of playing God, and as a result, his wife dies. And the machine, whatever they call it, that exoskeleton thing that has the tentacles, it sticks to his body and kind of drives him into a crazy person. But then at the end of the film, there's a redeeming moment where he sacrifices himself. And then with Green Goblin, the fact that the film shows how much Harry and Peter were actually friends. When you see Norman, who's Willem Dafoe, when you see him die and he knows it's Peter, I mean, even though he knows it's Peter before the end scene, but, the fact, there's just a lot there where you say, wow, like, this is traumatic. And the fact that Peter has to bring his best friend's dead dad to his house, his apartment, or whatever. And, his best friend Harry's going to watch his dad dead. And, he blames Spider-Man, even though, Norman was a bad guy, right? Mm-hmm. And Peter doesn't have the heart to tell him what actually happened. Like, that's drama. That's like Shakespearean drama, where that's like good writing. And this, it's just like, oh, Dr. Connors was friends with Peter's parents. They don't really go into a lot of detail. And now he's a lizard man and wants to turn New York into lizard people. And the guy who's his, quote, handler or boss, that ends up being the guy that owns the island in Jurassic World 1, that Indian guy. Like, he's just like your ambiguous, just, I'm a corporate douchebag kind of person. I'm just evil to be evil. We go by the books. And we have a gigantic medical facility that we test genetically modified people and like spiders and lizards in this place that's literally, you walk outside and you take a left and like there's skyscrapers everywhere in the middle of New York City. I mean, it's just so stupid. And it seems so like they just made the film for the sake of being able to hold on to the rights. And I don't know. I just really feel like since Spider-Man 2, I don't love any Spider-Man movie that's come out. I feel like they've really kind of done the character a little bit of an injustice. I feel like there's a lot of source material there that's really good and compelling. And then they just haven't done anything with it. And I think this film too, I remember when it was announced, when it was said it was Mark Webb was going to direct it. The only film of his I had seen was 500 Days of Summer. And I thought, I'm like, oh, like, well, I really like that movie. That movie was pretty good. And he didn't do a really good job. Like, 500 Days of Summer, maybe that was an anomaly for him because that film was really good. And Spider-Man just seemed like a really kind of a lifeless corporate, I don't know, just like some Sony executive said, or Amy Pascal said, let's just make it because we have to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I agree they did an injustice because Spider-Man is a super colorful character. He's red and blue, and he's supposed to be this like geeky, lighthearted person that cares for his family. Whereas in this movie, it feels like it almost gave me a Dark Knight kind of a vibe. It felt like a super dark, version of New York City and just a really dark environment for Spider-Man. And I feel like Andrew Garfield's portrayal was kind of strange. To me, it seemed like he was sick and tired, like the entire movie, maybe hungover, whatever. He just had really, really low energy, and he didn't have the same, like, he wasn't as witty. He didn't seem, as smart and clever and nerdy. He didn't have that same sort of innocence that Spider-Man should have, I mean, Tobey Maguire, I think he does an okay job. I think we're going to disagree here. I think he does an okay job. He's nerdy and he's quiet and shy and he's really smart, but for me, my favorite is Tom Holland, just because I think he actually embodies, like, what Spider-Man is supposed to be, which is super smart and super witty and funny, but also shy and nerdy and whatnot. And so I just feel like Andrew Garfield is probably the worst portrayal of the three of them. And, tied together with Emma Stone, I think that their chemistry was pretty good in this movie, but granted, they were dating in real life, so...
Which is crazy, because you would think dating in real life would make the chemistry better, but I've heard some people make videos on YouTube where they say that these actors, when they're dating, actually makes the chemistry worse.
Oh, really? I thought it was okay in this movie, but another thing is with Emma Stone, her character Gwen Stacy was pretty weak for me, not just Andrew Garfield, but for her, I don't think that she went through any sort of development throughout the entire movie. She was kind of just there for Peter to stalk and fall in love with, and then the only thing that really happens for her, I mean, she's a big character in this movie, but the only thing that's really character altering for her is that her dad dies, but it's not till the very end of the movie, and her dad makes Peter promise to him that, he'll stay away from her to keep her safe and whatever, and then 5 minutes later, boom, promises are meant to be broken.
And then the next sequel, because of Peter, she dies.
Yeah, so... I guess, the karma, it makes sense, but I just feel like it's not well written. I don't think that her character was deserving of that.
I think this all goes back to what we even talked about before with Emma Watson. Or sorry, not Emma Watson, Emma Stone.
Emma Stone.
I don't really know how good of like an actor she is. I think it really kind of boils down to that. Like, I don't think she's a bad actor, but like, I think like everybody in it was like fine. The only character that was actually maybe a little better than fine was Dennis Leary, and that's only because the character he played wasn't in the first movie. Like that chief kind of cop kind of guy, that wasn't in the first one. But every other character, like I truly believe, it was worse than Spider-Man's 1 through 3. Like people might say, oh well, you have your nostalgia glasses on, and those characters weren't really that good. Like J.K. Rowling or J.K. Simmons, sorry, wasn't really that good as oh my gosh, the editor for the paper, J.J. Watson? Is that a character? He wasn't, yeah, whatever the guy that runs with Bugle's name. Like, you could say, oh, he wasn't as good, and, Willem Dafoe wasn't really that good as Green Goblin, or, people might say, oh, well, Dane DeHaan was really better than James Franco as Harry Osborn.
No.
I just disagree with all of it. Like, I just feel like, maybe you could make an argument that Tom Holland's better than Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, and I think that's really because of like the differences between them. Where like when I view like Tobey Maguire, I was kind of viewed him as like a guy that was like 28 years old when he was in those films, and I knew that he was supposed to be in high school, but like I didn't even buy it for a second. But, like with Tom Holland, he really does look like a high schooler, and he really kind of acts like a high schooler. Whereas Tobey Maguire acts like a guy that was write a master's thesis out of college. So yeah, it was very different, but yeah, with Amazing Spider-Man, there's just, I think too, it's really good to think about the context of when it came out. I think if I'm correct, it came out like end of May 2012. So people had just seen Avengers, and then they would see The Dark Knight Rises like a month and a half later, or 2 months later, and yeah, it's just totally forgettable. And you saw what happened with the Spider-Verse that they tried to make when they did the sequel to Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2 in like whatever it was, May 2014, and the fact that it kind of died off. Like, it's just, yeah, it was just, they produced it fast, they didn't put a lot of effort into it, and there wasn't really any kind of like TLC with it. There was no like tender loving care for the property. Like, it didn't seem like there was a strong admiration towards any of the characters, and I feel like they just kind of did it just because they had to and because they wanted to make money, which is fine. That's all films are made for money. But this one in particular, I just think that's the biggest issue with it. Like, I don't even know how you could, honestly, I don't know how you could have really fixed The Amazing Spider-Man. Like, I don't know what you could have done. Like, you would have had to rework the script, not use Lizard Man, recast everybody. So, yeah, the film, it's not terrible. Like, it's not terrible. Like, I've watched it more than once. So even calling it a one-timer for me, it's a little tongue-in-cheek because I've probably seen it 5 or 6 times. But, yeah, if you're a person now, you've come to the superhero game, like, way late. It's 2019, and you've just, like, discovered superheroes all of a sudden right now. You can certainly skip it. There's at least got to be 35 superhero films that are worth seeing over this. For goodness sakes, there's what? There's like 10 superhero films that have Spider-Man in them. If you count the 3 with Sam Raimi, the 2 Amazing Spider-Mans is 5. Then you count Civil War, Homecoming, Infinity War is 3. That puts it at 8. Into the Spider-Verse is 9. So then Endgame and Far Away From Home is going to be 11. Mm-hmm. So by the summertime, there will have been 9 films, big budget films with Spider-Man in them. At least out of the 7 that have happened now, there's only one I think that's worse than it. Like, even Spider-Man 3, I think it's better than this one.
Really? It's been a long time since I've seen the third one, but I just remember it being a hot mess with a ton of villains. But if I do remember correctly, those villains did have pretty clear intentions, so I guess it would make it better than Amazing Spider-Man.
And Harry, he dies at the end, and there's a reconciliation with his friend. So, like, at least I feel like you get a little bit of
you get closure.
Yeah, there's some closure, and at least you get to see Kristen Dunst and Tobey Maguire again. But this one, yeah, and it's continuity-wise, it doesn't even exist anymore anyways. So, like, there are no new Spider-Man films that have anything to do with this one at all. So, yeah, I would definitely say it's a one-timer. I mean, especially when you have so many superhero films out now. Like, I don't know, even a film like Aquaman. I mean, even though Aquaman was really stupid and was just really bad, at least if you watch it now, you have something to talk with your friends. Like, if you're just at your house and you're in front of Hulu or Netflix, and for some reason Amazing Spider-Man is even an option for you to watch, I mean, you might as well just not watch anything. So you're just not going to get anything out of it. Like, you're going to walk away and you're going to be like, oh, that was okay. Like the scene where Peter Parker is being lifted up by the crane union workers of New York when they have to keep pulling up the crane so he can swing to fight Dr. Connors. That's kind of inspiring. It's like, oh, look at these people have come together. But then, like, you think to yourself, like, wait, I just watched Spider-Man get shot in the leg. And he looks pretty, like, gimpy from that. Like, if someone shot him in the head, is he dead? Like, you never want to think that about a superheroes aren't supposed to be put in a situation where you could watch them mortally die from, like, a non-superpowered person. So we see him shot in the leg, like, oh, gosh, like, dude, shoot him a couple more times and he's just a guy in tights. Like, that's not even something unique.
I think, yeah, this movie was definitely a disservice to Spider-Man. And the crane thing was also kind of ridiculous because, I mean, at no point was the city ever against Spider-Man. The city was never collectively a character that was an antagonist towards Spider-Man. So the fact that they all came together to use the cranes and whatnot was, I mean, it wasn't even really that uplifting because the city was never against him in the first place, you know?
The crane unions workers. They're working that late at night to put up those cranes so Spider-Man could go fight Dr. Connors.
Yeah, just kind of a goofy, sad movie overall, I'd say. But a one-timer for the action, and if you're a fan of Emma Stone, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're a fan of, Mark Webb or whatever, maybe like 500 Days of Summer.
We're not being very convincing, but
yeah, I mean, it's just it's not bad. It's not that good either. It's the epitome of a one-timer.
It is mediocre. We'll catch you next time.